Modern mountain bikes are literally designed around dropper seat posts. And in order to figure out what length dropper seat post you can fit on your bike, there's definitely a right way and there's definitely a wrong way. In this video, we're gonna go through both techniques.
A big thanks to my sponsors, Ibis Cycles, Camelback, PNW Components, Kitspo Cycling Apparel, Cali Protectives, Shimano, Fox, WTB, and Jensen USA. Any purchases at Jensen USA from the below links will directly help support my channel as well.
As you may well know, modern mountain bikes are literally designed around dropper seat posts. New school geometry of steep seat angles and slack head angles, they require an out-of-the-saddle aggressive riding style when going downhill. Without a dropper seat post, it's literally impossible to ride these bikes how they were intended to be ridden. It might seem fairly straightforward, just put a dropper post on your bike, ride and be happy, but with travel options going from as short as 80 millimeters all the way up to 185 millimeters, there's a bit of science behind picking the right length dropper post for your bike. What can often happen and what you want to avoid is buying a post that's too long for your bike and requires you to compress it into its travel when you need to climb. You'll always end up with the wrong saddle height, and it's one thing to think about when you're riding that you really shouldn't have to deal with. As easy as it might sound, the math to determine how much of your seat post will fit in your bike and the resulting saddle height, it's fairly straightforward, but there's so many things going on it can get a little confusing. Historically, mountain bikes have been sized by their seat tube length, which is center of the bottom bracket to top of the seat tube. In this case, that's 395 millimeters. The critical measurement that'll determine what works for you is your personal center of bottom bracket to center of saddle rail measurement on your own bike. We're gonna call that distance your seated height. Now, there's two things that really complicate this. It's the max insertion amount within your frame, and it's the stack height of the seat post that you actually want to use. The term stack height refers to what PNW Components refers to as measurement C here, and that's from the center of the saddle rails down to the bottom of the seat collar of the seat post. As we dive into this, I'm going to explain the actual math just in case you're doing this theoretically based off of manufacturer's dimensions and seat post dimensions, assuming you don't have these products in your hands in front of you. It's smart to do this math in advance to be sure you've got plenty of space to run your dropper post low enough that you can ride at the correct seated height. First, we need to find out if we're gonna have space between the seat clamp of the frame and the base of the collar of the actual seat post. We need to subtract the seat post insertion length from the max insertion depth of the frame. In this case, it's 215 minus 130, and we get a positive 85 millimeters hanging out above the seat collar. If we get a positive number, that means it's gonna be hanging out above. If we get a negative number, we're generally gonna be in the clear that we can run the seat post bottomed out against the frame seat clamp. Now keep in mind, internally routed seat posts often have a bit of a mechanism in the bottom that needs to clear pivots and linkages and such. In order to find the actual lowest possible height for the seat, you're gonna need to add up the difference between seat post inserted depth and frame max insertion to find out the portion of seat post that's outside the frame, and then add that to the frame's center of bottom bracket to top of seat post length. That'll determine the frame's lowest possible seated height. Overall, the basic formula is figure out the center of bottom bracket to top of seat tube and add that to the amount of seat post you're gonna have above the seat collar of the frame. That will be your seated height. So what do you wanna do if you can almost fit that longer drop seat post on your bike and you don't wanna go all the way down to the next lower size? Your difference is only a few millimeters. Well, in that case, there's a few little hacks, a few little sneaky tricks that'll get you to fit that longer drop post on your bike. First trick to squeezing onto that next size up dropper post is pretty low-hanging fruit. Simply try sliding your saddle forward and see if that'll get you a little bit more reach. Sometimes that'll be good for a couple millimeters of extra room to reach the pedals. Now the next trick in getting a little bit more space for that dropper post is in the saddle selection. Some saddles have a lot less stack height than others. Now this means the distance between the center of the rails and the top of the saddle. Let's go through the measurements of a few different seats to see just how that distance can change in just one brand. Now, one other sneaky thing to remember, a well-ridden saddle has already developed more flex and is kind of crunched in a bit and will often have an even lower stack height than a brand new saddle. Now, my wife is riding a brand new Ibis Ripley LS and she loves the bike. That said, the stock seat post is a little bit too high for her seated riding height. In order to fix this, I went ahead and got a PNW Components Cascade dropper post and did a few little tricks to go ahead and make it fit on her bike. This would definitely be called the wrong way to fit a long dropper post on your bike, and the modifications I made fully void the warranty, and I don't even know if they're gonna work long term. I'm only gonna show you guys this because it is definitely the wrong way to go about setting up your bike. I don't recommend you doing this or trying it, but I went ahead and did. It's up to you to make the choice if you want to ruin your seat post or not. This is definitely not encouraged by P&W Components, Jensen USA, Ibis, WTB, or any of the companies that I work with. One-Up Components also makes a fantastic dropper post, and they have a really cool shim kit that'll help you lower its extended travel to whatever amount you need to get the seat post to fit on your bike. I'm not an expert in One-Up seat posts, but sure enough, that shim fit into the channels of the P&W unit. However, there's a big design difference between the Cascade and the One-Up posts, and you actually have to shorten that internal shaft by cutting it. Now, the hardest part of shortening the shaft is actually making a little notch that the set screw for the pulley actuator assembly at the bottom of the seat post uses to lock into place. I'm pretty confident that my modification will work successfully, so I set it up for my wife's bike, installed the seat post, had to use external routing with a little bit of a custom touch to it to fit it to this Ripley LS. What I ended up with was a 75mm drop P&W Cascade dropper. There we go. With proper planning and a little bit of math, you can avoid having to do any kind of hacks, and you can fit a pretty long dropper post on a smaller bike. Like I mentioned earlier, P&W Components does not condone the hacking of their seat posts in the way I did. It voids the warranty. Not recommended. Don't try this at home, kids. If you need to fit that longer drop post on your bike and you need a lower stack height saddle, I have links in the YouTube description below to the various WTB saddles we used in this video. I also have links to P&W Components dropper seat posts over at Jensen USA. And for good measure, I dropped a link to my wife's Ibis Ripley LS in the description as well. If you guys need any support, don't hesitate to reach out to the guys at Jensen USA. They'll help get you the right parts. And if you have any questions for me, feel free to leave me a comment below. I'd also like to hear, how long is the dropper post on your favorite bike? If you guys like this video, every week or so I drop something new. Click that subscribe button below to get a little notification when I have a new video coming out. See you guys on the trails.